but we don't know anything else. We know it's from Islay. We know it says small batch release. But how are you doing, dear friends of Talking About Whiskey, your favorite whiskey channel? You already know it well. My name is Eduardo, and here we are again in Madrid, the capital of what remains of Spain, to make a new and interesting video about, as I always say, what the hell is whiskey going to be about on a channel called Talking About Whiskey? So, what do we have here today? We have an independent bottler, Finlaggan. Red wine cask matured, aged in red wine casks. As it is said in the entire Spanish-speaking world. Right. Red wine it would be, or well, red wine. 46% alcohol by volume. Finlaggan is an independent bottler. It does not indicate here whether it is chill filtered. If it contains coloring, it says absolutely nothing. We do not know the distillery. A bottle that I bought quite some time ago. I no longer remember this. I don't know if it is still available for purchase or if it even exists. It's an Islay single malt Scotch whiskey. At least we know that they bought the whiskey from some distillery in Islay. Do you see it there? I think it says it right here, doesn't it? Here it says there, Islay, you have it, that line, an Islay single malt Scotch whiskey. But we don't know anything else. We know it's from Islay. We know it says small batch release. This is a distillery, a company that is in Glasgow. But I tell you, we don't know what whiskey could be here. We don't know if they bought it and then recast it in red wine barrels. We have no idea. We don't know if there is Caol Ila here, if there is Bowmore or whatever it may be. Those are the two that we clearly know they sell, but we don't know if there is Laphroaig, if there is Glengarioch, although they say there isn't. However, the truth is that Glengarioch is in certain blends, and Laphroaig also sells to independent bottlers out there, if I'm not mistaken. So we don't really know. I mean, what could be here? The most likely, well, everyone always says Bowmore and Caol Ila, right? I don't know. Caol Ila produces millions and millions of liters, but it's impossible to know. Well, it's a rare finish, isn't it? Red wine cask, Mateo. There aren't usually many of those, and we don't know the age either, so it's safe to assume. We're talking about supposedly young whiskey. He claims that a guy who is the selector, not the distiller, selected it with a scribble here. I don't know who he is, and it doesn't say much more either on the box or in the notes. I think this cost me not very much. I believe this cost me around 30 euros some time ago. And the bottle has been lying around the house for a long time. I thought, let's give this whiskey a chance, and you know, we have no idea. It's impossible to know if it doesn't say so. We have no clue. There could be any whiskey. The only thing we know is that it is from Islay, and supposedly any Eagle distillery could have supplied this company with this whiskey. So, well, let's see what we find here. It's a color that, if you notice, is quite dark, I think. Wow, it really has color. Yes, you can see it. Look, you can clearly see it in the bottle. I don't know if it has coloring. It probably does. And it is likely cold filtered as well, given its very intense color, an amber color, medium yellow, and even intense amber. And it moves quite lightly in the glass. It could be here for 4, 5, or 6 years. We don't know. Maybe 7, 8, no idea. It definitely smells of smoke, that I can tell you. Let's see what we find on the nose. Well, the truth is that it has a very iodine note. Wow. A lot of peat. Very maritime, very salty, very pleasant on the nose at 46%. An alcohol integration that is very, very, very good. Burnt rubber, tire. Very synthetic in that sense regarding the phenolic part of the peat, which has gone to a more chemical aspect in that transmission of notes. But it absolutely smells right now like at a circuit when you go to watch a rally or whatever. That smell of burnt rubber from the tire, literally. There is a note a bit like barbecue, burnt meat as well, a lot of smoke, a lot of burnt. It's difficult to identify anything behind those notes. It's a whiskey with a lot. A very significant amount of peat with a very important phenolic load. Therefore, this is a whiskey for those of you who are very fond of peat or smoke. At first, it is difficult to perceive much beyond that burnt rubber tire, iodine note and maritime note, not so much, rather more burnt. However, the alcoholic integration is truly interesting, and I can guarantee that. There is hardly any alcohol. It's quite oxygenated, quite fresh, but it is true that the nose is quite simple. The influence of the red wine from the red wine casks must be that it has only spent a month there, because I don't notice any wine notes or anything. There is something there in the distance, but it's practically just a testimonial, and above all, the iodine comes through very strongly. Well, it's a smoky whiskey from Islay, so you would expect it to be a at least like this. But I tell you, there is nothing behind it. It's hard for me. Let's see on the palate. Cheers. Well, let's see. It's the same thing again. The smoke returns, the iodine returns, the peat returns. Very good alcoholic integration. It's semi-sweet. It is quite noticeable. Yes, there are some rather strange notes now on the palate, somewhat different from what is usually found in smoky whiskey. In other words, you can perhaps perceive a hint of those red wine barrels. In some way, there is something different. It is pleasant on the palate. It is a nice smoky whiskey. Look, that is how I would define it best. A nice smoky whiskey with somewhat spicy notes on the palate. A bit peppery, but very smooth, very light. The alcoholic integration is very, very good. And look, it is a simple and pleasant Islay whiskey. I would define it as 1000. It has no exoticism, no strange elements, but rather a lot of smoke, a lot of iodine, many burnt notes, something a bit maritime, salty in the background, some slightly different wood notes on the palate and the body. It is very intense, it is extremely long, the finish is very long, it has a pleasant warmth with a hint of spice, and it is very enjoyable. I don't know how much this cost me. It must have been around 30 something euros. I think this, or something like it, look, is the best way to define it. An Islay whiskey. I think this is a cheap Kaolila. To put it simply, it gives me the feeling of a straightforward Bowmore. An Islay whiskey with a reasonable price that is very pleasant on the palate. It is intense and strong. It is curious because it is an intense whiskey, a strong whiskey, but it is a pleasant whiskey, one that is easy to drink, bringing you the true experience of Islay with its notes of peat, smoke, and iodine. And especially interesting is the burnt rubber, literally burnt tire. But it doesn't offer much more. It doesn't give more than that. In that sense, it won't provide an additional boom or punch, which is what one might expect from this type of whiskey with these finishes. So it disappoints. It doesn't deliver what it promises, more or less. But I was perhaps expecting a little more exoticism with the whole red wine cask maturation thing. It should be a maturation, not a finish. It is labeled as mature. But of course, we also need to consider those barrels, those bottles, those casks, like how worn they are or how much grape tannins they have. Yes, you can notice a bit from the grape skins. But above all, as I said, smoke was mentioned in the description. And it's not bad at all. I recommend it if you want to buy a whiskey. Especially if you really enjoy smoky flavors and are looking for something straightforward, not too expensive, and you want to buy it. You will enjoy it. Not smart whiskey at all. That brings us to the end of today's video. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for staying until the end. Now that you've arrived, give it a like, comment, and subscribe to the notification bell for those stories which help us a lot to maintain the channel. Please remember to always drink in moderation and be very happy, as that is the most important thing of all, because if you are not at least somewhat happy, then just look at your pack and what the hell are we doing here? I'll see you in the next video if you want. Of course, a big hug. Bye. See you soon.